Okay, so the programming languages one is super similar to the one we did yesterday, the Pigeon. I actually wrote this because people like originally really struggled with the Pigeon one and just wanted more practice, so I just made up another one. Um, First thing I did was I just took the nested data structure that I'm starting with and the nested data structure that I'm ending with, and just threw it onto my file. And you'll see I removed a bunch of the data. That's one thing that may be helpful for you guys is if there's like a ton of data and it's all in the same structure, in terms of like how you think about doing it. Once you have a general solution, it doesn't really matter how many keys and values you have. It's gonna work the same. So for me, just visually, it's easier to see if there's less stuff. That said, the reason I picked JavaScript was you'll notice like JavaScript is the only one that's both functional and object oriented in the list. So I just want to make sure like that's the odd case. So I want to make sure I pick the odd case so that my solution works for the odd case. And I don't think I have the solution, but I've actually neglected some edge case. Okay, so as I look at this, again, like similar to what I did yesterday, I'm kind of just looking at like where the keys are that I need that are going to become the top level keys in the result hash. So I kind of need to go like one level deep, if you will, to get the key that I'm going to need to put at the top level of my output. So that's kind of where I'm going to start, is I'm just going to start iterating until I can get access to the language key. So I have languages. I'm going to say each pair do. That's going to give me, we'll call it style and say values. So say like style, like that, and values like that. So then I can say values, values, let's see, values points to, yeah, I think I am, yes. Right, so my values is going to be a hash, and I know the keys are going to be the languages. So if I say each pair, I'm going to get the language itself, and let's say it's like attributes. And now I should be kind of like where I need to be. So a language is like JavaScript, and an attribute is like this. So now I should have all the data that I need. So let me put like some sort of results hash. And I can say result at the key of language. And what do I want to set it equal to? Well, in my result hash, it points to like its own hash. So the first thing I need to do, again, there's going to be like two cases, right? Case one, I've never seen this language before. Case two, I have seen it. So if I've never seen this before, let's describe that using some kind of conditional. So I can say, if I've never put this key into the hash before, then I need to create some kind of hash as its value. And in that hash, I'm going to have two high-level keys. So I'm going to say if I have one of those high-level keys, and those high-level keys are represented by, let's say, style, no. Values are like JavaScript type interpret. So I think it's attributes that I want, right? Because that's going to give me things like type. Let me know if that doesn't come back on. Okay, so I'm going to have like, the first thing that's going to happen is I'm going to say, hey, have I ever seen this language before at all? Oh, did I open? Yeah, I think I opened it. So let me create this hash as a value, and then I'm going to say, okay, inside that hash, if I've never seen this particular key before, I'm going to see the keys of type and style. If I've never seen those before, make sure I put those in. So result, language, attribute, and that's going to be equal to another hash. No. Yeah.
Don't you only ever hit each language once, except JavaScript, and then when you try to, since you can't rename the key, since it won't overwrite, it's only a conflict. Like you only iterate, like the languages, there's no repetition except for JavaScript. So why do you need that if statement?
The one up here?
Yeah. When it's never been seen.
So yeah, so
Isn't it always never seen before?
except for JavaScript, right?
Yeah, but won't not overwrite because it's a
Okay, so
because it's a symbol.
okay, so let's think like let's take the case of JavaScript, right? The first time I haven't seen JavaScript, I'm gonna run this line, right? If I get rid of the if, the second time I haven't seen JavaScript, I'm gonna say, okay, the key of the symbol JavaScript is going to be equal to a hash. So I'm going to erase everything that I did before. I'm going to reset it to an empty hash. So anytime I see something twice, I have to have some kind of conditional to deal with that case. So now I'm saying, okay, right, and same problem here, right, with like the keys. I don't want to end up replacing what's set for the values of the style and type. So I'm going to say the first time I see it, I need to set it equal to an empty hash. The second time I see it, I'm going to need to do something else. And probably that something else is really nothing. And always I'm going to need to say result, language, attribute. I'm always going to need to shovel in what is it? The attribute points to. So I need to get interpreted. Okay, so now we also have two different cases, right? So for one key, the key of type, I'm doing one thing. I'm just kind of like setting it equal. And for the key of style, it should point to an array. So it's actually two different cases, right? So I can hard code this because there's no real other way to deal with it. It's just like two different keys have two different values. So I'm going to say for if result language attribute, and I need to know if we're talking about, so we're talking about the key of type. So if the attribute is type, then I don't need to do anything. I can just say I'm going to set the key of attribute, and I'm going to set it equal to attribute at type. And that's going to give me, so I have this hash, right? This is the attribute value, right? So I'm going to say if the attribute, oh wait, that doesn't work, right? Because the attribute we said is the hash itself. What's that? Let's see. Oh yeah, I can just take the whole hash probably, right? Can I just do that? Interesting. So the first time I come through, I create an empty hash, and then I say, no, I can't really do that. What's a more clever way to do this? Well, maybe we have to iterate further so that we have access to the actual key and value.
Isn't type a hash? Value. Key value.
So attribute is this whole hash. So there's no way to refer to this singularly or this singularly. So I think I need to be further into the nesting. So let's say attributes each pair do. And that will give us, call it like a property and property value maybe. Okay, so now we should be able to say result language. So if the property we're talking about is type, right, we're just going to say result language property, and we're going to set it equal to the property value, right, because that's going to be, for type always just points to a singular thing. And for style, it's this other weird case where it's going to be an array. So the other case is, so if the property is not type, there's no other properties, then we're going to say result language property, and that's going to be an array the first time, and the second time we will just be shoveling something in. We're going to shove it in the property value. So if result language property, so if this is nil, then I need to create the array and then shovel it in. So a more concise way to say that is, so in the case of property where it's type, right, I'm just setting it equal. If it's going to be the other thing, which is style, then the first time I see style, I'm going to need to create an array at the key of property, or we could hard code it if we want to just be style, if that's a little more clear. And we're going to say, okay, that's got to be an array. And then always, whether or not it's the first time or the second time, I'm going to shovel in the property value. Just going to get rid of this. So if, else, end, I have an extra end. All right, so let me talk through it again and see if it makes sense. So first time I see a language, I need to create a hash to hold its stuff, right? And then I'm going to iterate further and say, okay, for each pair of these attributes, and an attribute is this hash that has the type or the style. So I'm going to iterate further so I can get access to these actual. I need a variable that actually will refer to one of these things. So that's how I'm going to iterate further. I'm going to say, okay, I get a property like type, right, and a property value. So now I'm going to end up hard coding stuff because there's just these weird cases for different keys. So I'm going to say in the case of type, and I can hard code this as well. Then I'm going to set it equal to its property value. In the case of style, if I've never seen this style before, right, because I'm going to see it multiple times, this one I'm only going to see once. If I've never seen it before, I need to create a holder for this stuff. So I'm going to set it equal to an array. And in both cases, whether I've seen it or whether I haven't seen it, I need to shovel in the property value. There's probably a way we could write this in a little bit more of a general sense, maybe by looking at the class of the result or something like that. I can go back and look at what the solution is that we've written up and see if there's a more general way. But my memory is that I always end up hard coding this because I can't think of a better way to express this in a general manner because it's just not really general. It's just there's a particular key that has a different value than another key. So let's see what this gives us. It's going to require pry. Oops. I need to call it. And I'm going to re-paste in the full data set. Cool. So we made a mistake somewhere in this block. So my error is in the each pair block. So somewhere inside of the 19 block, it says undefined method index equals for nil class. So the only place where I'm calling the index inside this block is here. And here. So let's, one nice trick I'll show you guys is you can use a begin rescue block if you're not sure exactly where your code is breaking, and you can have it, we haven't talked about error handling yet, but basically what you can do is you can surround any code block with this begin rescue end. So basically what it says is if there's ever an error in here, immediately jump to rescue, and this little hash rocket just says save the error message into a variable called e, and then run this code. So what it'll do is it'll stop as soon as it hits the error. It will go into pry, and that way I'll still be in scope for whatever went wrong, so I can like play with like the value of different variables and get a better sense of like kind of exactly what went wrong. So now I can say, okay, what's result? What's result? Where are we? Language. Language is Ruby. Oh. Does anybody see my mistake? So, what? Put no where? Yes. So I wrote the opposite of what I meant. I said, if this thing exists, then set it equal to a hash. So it never is creating the initial key. What I meant to say is, if I haven't done this before, right, do this. So this did not do what we hoped, right? So we're missing, so we're getting type, we're never getting style. So in here, right, we're saying if property is type, it's running this. Otherwise, we're saying, maybe I did this backwards. So we're saying if result at language, so that should exist, right? And then we're saying if the style key is nil, that sounds right to me, so let's see what's going on. So we never get into the else block.
Because the ones that have style also have type.
Ones that have style also have type.
It's two keys in one hash.
But I guess I'm thinking that like this property value should take on the values of either type or style. Maybe I'm wrong.
Style doesn't exist.
Oh, did I make that up? Oh, thanks, guys.
I thought you were, you're shoveling in.
I was looking at this and seeing style. I didn't realize it did not appear up here.
Yep.
Style comes from this, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, you just have to run it. You have to part
All right. So, right. So we get type, and then I just look upwards, right, to style up here. That's where I got style. And that is the thing. Okay, cool. So I set type to be property language. So let's just drop all of this and try and write it again. All right. Okay, so here, right, we get property and property value, so that gives us type. And then we want to say, so I'm just kind of going to sort of like write the code that I wished I could write. Right, so I'm going to say key of style is equal to an array, and then I'm going to set it, right, by putting in the variable style, right, which comes from up here. And then I'm going to shovel in the which value. So it's the key of style. Oh, so that's not what I want. I again want symbol style, right? And I shovel in the key of style, the variable style. So style should take on the two values, OO or functional, this variable, which I'm getting from the block up here. So as we're iterating, like at some point it will be object-oriented, at some point it'll be functional, and hopefully those should both get shoveled into the key of this. And then I have to take care of the case where style doesn't exist yet so that I don't replace it every time. So I can say if result language style is nil, right, I'm going to set it equal to an array, and always I'm going to shovel it in. So now let's see what we get. Now we got it. What did I do wrong? So we got the type, we got the style. Yeah, that looks right to me. Okay, so let's rerun these specs. Just make sure I got it right. Cool. Okay, so let's talk through this again. All right, so the first thing that I'm thinking is I need to just get rid of the stuff that's like not helpful for me, right? I just want to get the structure, figure out like where it needs to go, and I can get rid of just repeated keys that aren't like edge cases. So the real edge case is JavaScript, right? Because it has two styles. So the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, where do I have access to the top level key? So top level key is here, right? So first thing I need to do is iterate to that point. So I'm going to iterate through languages, right? Each pair, right? And I'm going to say the styles are going to take the values like OO or functional, and then I'm going to say the values are this whole hash. So I still need to go deeper to get access to this variable, right? That's what I said I wanted. So I'm going to iterate over each pair of those things, and I'm going to call them languages or language and attributes. And I'm saying language is like a JavaScript or Ruby or something like that, right? And an attribute is this hash of its type. So I went down kind of like a bad path, right, where I was trying to figure out how do I get access to this variable, and then I realized I just have to go further into the nesting so that I have a variable that references this thing, right? Because if it was an array, I could just say, give me the thing at position 0. But in a hash, there's no way to like get into the hash per se and get access to this thing. That said, like I guess if I know in advance that type is the thing and I'm going to end up hard coding it, we could probably skip iterating again and just call type on its own and then grab the value of type. Should we play with that idea? You guys want to see that? Okay, let's try and rewrite this then. Okay, so I'm going to get out of my nesting. So, right, no matter what, I'm going to have to set the key of language, right? And I got to make sure if I hit it more than once, I don't overwrite myself. Okay, so here I have access to attributes, right, and language. So the first thing I need to do is set my language key, right? Language. And then I need to set this type key, right? So I'm going to say type is equal to the attributes hash at the value of type, right? So the attributes hash is this, and I know in advance, like I'm just kind of hard coding this idea that I know that it's type that I'm talking about, and if I ask for the key of type, it'll give me back interpreted or compiled, right? And I'm just going to set that equal. It's just going to give me a string value. I'm cool with that. Then the other thing I need to do is I need to worry about the style, right? So I'm going to say language at style is going to take on the values of multiple things. I need an array to hold that stuff, and then I need to actually shovel in the values that style is going to take on, right? And so the cool thing about like when I'm nested is I have access to anything that's like above me in scope. So I can say, I know style is going to take on the values of like OO and functional, so when I'm in here, I can just shovel those in. But I need to take care of the case of where I've never set this key before, right? Because I'm going to hit this twice. So I don't want to overwrite the first thing that I set that I shovel into the array with an empty array. So like the slick way to do it is just using this or equals, right? Which or equals says basically if this returns nil, do this assignment. If it exists, skip this assignment. So I could write out like, you know, if, result, et cetera. But kind of the terse way to write it is just this or equals and then shovel in the style. So I think. Yeah, so let's see how tight we can make this. Result at language or equals a hash, right? So we should be able to get this whole thing done with this like pretty tight code. And we did. So lessons from this, when you have a hash and you need to get access to this stuff, you could do one additional level of nesting, but it could be superfluous. If you only have one key value pair and you know what the key is, it's perfectly fine to like, this isn't really considered hard coding, right? If there's some specific result you're after and somebody said this specific result's got to be the specific data structure, you're not hard coding it because this is already sort of hard coded, like what somebody's asked you to produce. Like there's no general solution for all data structures that have to end up like that. So this one we can kind of hard code it a little bit and use some or equals, and now we have like a pretty tight little code. I'll throw both of these on a gist. What? Correct, thank you. Okay, so I did a lot of talking. Questions? Anything else I can say about this that's helpful? Is that useful to hear me just like talk through how I think about it? See some nods. Okay. It was either useful or not. You know.